Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Michael Sartain with me. Michael is former military. He currently has his own podcast, and he runs a group of men called Founder of Men, or he's founder of Men of Action. And one of the things that I think you're going to really take away in our conversation today is Michael has said, learn how to stop getting 80% out of what you want. And I think that's going to be really important to his story and where he's at. So Michael, thanks so much for being on today, brother.
Hey man, thanks for having me. I love this. A lot of times I'll do different people's podcasts and I don't know what to expect. The other day I went on with some police officers. I didn't know where that was going. I'll tell you, there's two people, one or three actually. One was Gary Vaynerchuk. When he was putting out his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. Sorry, I just rescued this cat. He's crawling on my computer. He was doing podcasts where he had a baby in his arms. You know, he had just come out with a new book, Jab, 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 right? He had a baby in his arms and he's like eating cereal and he's done like 17 podcasts that day. The second one was Neil deGrasse Tyson. I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson when he came out with, what's it called? Astrophysics for people in a hurry. He's doing podcasts with like 35 subscribers at the time. I remember doing it to promote his book. And the third was Bilzerian. Dan Bilzerian told me one time, he's like, under no circumstances, if someone asks me for a photo, I always say yes. So it was one of these things where I put out a challenge and I was like, literally anyone who's watching this too, I will go on anyone's podcast, period. I will do it. I hope that when I die, my grandkids can go back and find like 700 episodes of me going on podcasts. So I always say yes. And I tell other people, this is the other thing. If you start a program, a lot of people want to start a coaching program or whatever. This is one of the things you have to do is you need to give out as much free content and value as possible. So this is something I learned from my mentors, and I try to do as much as I can.
I love it. Well, I'm excited for all the listeners to hear some of the great content that I know you have. So to kick off your story, you decided to go to the University of Texas, and while you were there, you were kind of manning the door at a nightclub. So talk a little bit about going to Texas for school, and then why that ended up being so important to you at the nightclub.
You know what I think it is it's really funny. I have a friend, she got her PhD in forensic psychology, and she was a stripper. And I used to ask her sometimes, I was like, do you feel like you have like a master's degree in men because you've been an exotic dancer? She's like, that's exactly right. Like, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
I feel like you get what would be like the equivalent of a master's degree in people if you were a police officer and you're constantly dealing with people on a regular basis. I feel like certain jobs just sort of give you this understanding of different types of psychology based on the experiences you have. Working the door at a nightclub in Austin, Texas in 1999 gives you an understanding of psychology that's different than other people would. Like, you kind of see this sort of dynamic where people, I remember it was really funny. One time we had a VIP line and we had a regular line, and so many people wanted to get in the VIP line that if you had walked in the regular line, you would have just gotten in faster because everyone wanted this status of getting in for VIP. I remember noticing like little things like that. And then also like the male over perception bias. I don't know if you've heard about this. Dr. David Buss talks about this, where when men given a graph to show what they think women find attractive, and then women showing what they find attractive, men think that women think the Schwarzenegger physique is what women find attractive, and women find the what's his name from Fight Club,
Edward Norton, no, Brad Pitt. The Brad Pitt warrior physique, super lean physique. Yeah. They find that more attractive in general than the Schwarzenegger physique, but men don't realize this. And by the way, women have what's called the under perception bias. Think all want quickie, right? If you if I met Eva Longoria one time in person, and I could not believe how fucking skinny she was, how small she was. And in reality, and then when Kim Kardashian came on the scene, not to say every man that's his dream girl, but like she was 10 years ago, like Kim Kardashian was the top, right? And when you look at Kim Kardashian, she has curves. And so women didn't realize what men really wanted was a little bit more of a healthy physique, a little bit more curves. And then, so now you start seeing these fitness models on Instagram. Those fitness models you see on Instagram were not popular in the 1980s. Right.
Women with six-pack abs and muscles were not considered by the mainstream media to be attractive, but secretly that is what men wanted, were fit women that could, be healthy. They could work out with them. These women could, help them out and have children with them. So I think that's what men deep down really wanted. So it's just an interesting, conundrum that happened with the perception bias that people had. But for me, the over perception bias was apparent because that was the first point in my life where I saw men abusing steroids, like at a massive rate. Now endocrinology and testosterone and stuff like that is something that I'm fascinated with. I'm learning more. I don't know everything about it. Yeah. I'm learning more, but that was the first time where I saw roid rage. Guys, because one of the things that happened was a lot of people don't realize this. 23 years ago, guys didn't know what they were taking. They were just putting anything in their body. If you guys want to read a great book about this, read Dan Bilzerian's book, The Setup, where he talks about going through SEAL training and just sticking needles in his body. He had no idea. He was just taking steroids. He didn't know what he was doing. Now, if you go off, you can literally find legitimate doctors that will not prescribe, but like will give you cocktails of like illegal steroids and tell you how much to cycle. I've delved into this world, and it is fascinating how guys like know how much equipoise, trenbolone, and fucking Deca to take. It's fucking crazy when you find out about this stuff. So that was the first point in my life where I actually saw huge roid rage, massive fight. You guys imagine Texas, Austin, Texas in 1999, no social media, no fucking cell phones. Right. There was these like fights like you have never seen in your life, huge brawls. I remember we had this one bartender who would jump off of, I remember he was a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan because he always wore a Buccaneers hat. He would jump off of the fucking top of the bar and drop elbows on dudes like he was Randy Savage. And then here's the other funny part, because people won't be able to relate to this. Guess what happened the next day? The guy who got his ass kicked showed up, got his credit card, shook the guy's hand, and went home. And nobody called the fucking cops. Right. Nobody went to jail. We just had a brawl, and nobody went to jail because you didn't pull out knives or guns or somebody, stick people with glasses. It was just punching. And then everyone would just go on with their lives. That's what would happen. Now, obviously, you don't see that. I haven't seen a fight in Las Vegas in 10 years. I'm not exaggerating. Not one fight in 10 years since I've been here, because if you get in a fight, you're kicked out of the hotels. And like, what's funny? If you're banned from the MGM in Las Vegas, right here at Tropicana and Las Vegas Boulevard, you're banned from the MGM in Macau.
No,
you're banned from the MGM in Atlantic City. Yes. Yeah. You're banned from every MGM property. If you're banned from the Harrah's over here or the Caesars over here, you're banned from every Caesars property on the planet. They have facial recognition software. So no one fights here. No one fights here. And it's such a different reality. And then the other part, I think, Phil, for me was seeing women say they liked guy X and then dating guy Y. That was a big thing for me, that later on I ended up managing a strip club and DJing at a strip club from, it would have been March of 2000 until February of, it's like January of 2000 to like February 2004. Yeah. I was working at a strip club. And during that time period, I just started seeing, again, I'm not saying that that's strip clubs are indicative of all women, but what I am saying is that you see extreme examples of, I'm not going back to this guy. This guy's a piece of shit. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm never talking to this dude again. And then that guy, she's just back with him the next day. Yeah. Seeing that over and over again. Remember, I'm 22 years old and I don't have that much experience with women at this point in my life. And I'm very much introduced to what Rollo Tomasi would call red pill awareness. I see it every day consistently. I remember this one girl named Cassidy. This is my first experience with domestic abuse. I'd never heard of a man hitting a woman in my life. Yeah. And she consistently would come to work with a black eye. And I remember after the second or third time, I was like, do you think that he hit you because he loves you? Like, is that why you're doing? Because I was genuinely confused. I was her manager and genuinely cared about her as a human being, and just watching her go through this abuse and like realizing there's nothing I can do to help her. I just remember thinking about these situations. And then later on in life, listening to women legitimately tell me that they're looking for this nice guy and all they care about is connection. And then watching them consistently date guys who were 6'3", covered in tattoos, or had money, or had six-pack abs, or had some kind of connection, or were famous. And so I'm hearing one thing and I'm watching another thing. And this disconnect was where rule number one in Men of Action comes from, which is we don't listen to people's words. We only pay attention to people's actions.
I love it. So you've done a lot of fascinating research in regards to, talking to people, right? I mean, it's not like you're just reading a book, like you're doing in the field research and hearing people's stories and asking questions. So what has been some of the, rationale that you've taken away from the conversations with, females and males? I mean, both can do the same thing, and why, hey, I think I want this, or I say I want this, but I actually end up going to this.
So what you're going to find is that, and I didn't know this back then. Like I'll be honest with you. You know, growing up in the church, there were points where the church was trying to convince me that natural selection wasn't real. If you guys understand my podcast and you watch my show, or you're belong to my program, you understand natural selection, like Darwin's natural selection on the origin of species, which he wrote in 1859, is sort of the basis for everything. What I was to understand growing up in Texas was that biology was a function and that evolution was just sort of this subset of biology, and not understanding that evolution is the key to everything in biology. But it was just sort of this weird thing. Like really, if you were to say which one of the sciences is the most underrated, evolutionary biology is by far Richard, which is why I believe personally Richard Dawkins is one of the most important human beings on the planet. Evolutionary biology as an explanation for why we act the way we are, while we are developed as the phenotype. That's what's happened when your genes manifest into a person. This is called a phenotype. And then later on, the advent of what's called evolutionary psychology, which was invented in the 1970s. And not invented by Dr. David Buss, but he was definitely a pioneer in evolutionary psychology. And then later on, like also Martin Daly, Leah Cosmides, Margot Wilson, additionally Sidney Meston, later on Satoshi Kanazawa, Stephen Stuart Williams, and then Steven Pinker and Jeffrey Wilson. These people Gadsad, obviously one of the greatest, Gadsad. Also, with these people, what they did was they understood the concept of natural selection and then applied it to human psychology. To me, the first part of the 1900s, the greatest discoveries for there would be relativity and quantum mechanics, to me. Then later on in the middle part of the century, it would be antibiotics, and then later on the invention of the transistor. During the end of that period, to me, the greatest discovery would be the discovery of evolutionary psychology. And so I think, let me throw one other thing. What's his face? Alan Turing, and the concept of the universal machine, which we later turned into computers. That would probably, let me throw that in there too. Yeah. These are the most important discoveries of the 1900s. To me, evolutionary psychology is like the most underrated player in the league. That is quite simply the clearest understanding of humanity, and it's so clear to understand, but because it is so politically unviable, people don't want to delve into this concept. And what I mean by that is when the concept of natural selection applied to our psychology, people on the right really don't like the concept of evolution, because evolutionary psychology, because what it does is it takes away the concept of free will. I don't believe humans have free will. They have free will in that they have a narrow range of choices that evolution has allowed them. You can choose between chocolate or vanilla ice cream, but not chocolate or poop ice cream. Nobody eats poop. We eat chocolate or vanilla, because chocolate and vanilla is sweet. And by the way, chocolate is a derivative of vanilla, if you guys didn't know that. So is strawberry. So those are, we have a very narrow group of choices. What we find attractive in women, the foods that we eat, etc., our haircuts, on our language. You don't know any people that grew up with two Christian parents that became a Muslim. There are a few, don't get me wrong, there are definitely a few. Maybe they went to prison, or maybe they went on a mission or moved to Africa or something. But most people, about 86% of the time, you end up becoming the same religion as your parents. There's certain proclivities that human beings have where they think they have a choice, but they don't really have a choice. Right? And so, like, again, most people, that grew up in the United States that didn't grow up, that weren't like second generation Mexicans or whatever, they grew up speaking English. And so like that's one of the things where we generally don't have a choice. We generally absorb or become close to what our tribe wants us to be in general. And then again, I'm a great example of this. I grew up in Texas. I joined the military. I'm a Protestant. I played high school football. All those things that you would think are just sort of generic. I believe I very much in favor of the Second Amendment. Things kind of like you would imagine from a cisgendered white passing Protestant that grew up in Texas. I kind of fall into all those categories, right? Yeah. And so once you understand the concept that evolution does not allow that much for free will, the conservatives don't like this idea because evolution doesn't really fit in the Bible. And then on the liberals don't like this because what does evolutionary psychology define? Gender roles. It very clearly defines evolutionary psychology is sort of the study of why male psychology and
female psychology are different, how males compete with other males for access to females, and how females compete with other females for access to males. That idea, what it does is it defines a difference in the neurobiology of men and women, and that is offensive to liberals. So conservatives find evolutionary psychology offensive. Liberals find evolutionary psychology offensive. It is not politically viable, but it is 100% true. And so this is a problem. The reason why this is the thing that doesn't spread like everything else. And this is the reason why my podcast is basically about the concept of evolutionary psychology. Once you take that tool as a lens and you start observing people, fucking everything makes sense, Phil. It is crazy how everything makes sense. Red pill manosphere stuff is sort of a derivative of some of the concepts of evolutionary psychology. I'm not going to put them one to one. Like, I don't think Steven Pinker and David Buss are red pill. Like, I wouldn't say that. But people in red pill do quote Steven Pinker and David Buss frequently. So it's kind of a weird thing. I will tell you from my standpoint, a lot of people are like, they're like, why do you get mixed up with a lot of these manosphere people? And I will tell you, I am manosphere only in that I believe in evolutionary psychology, and everything else is a derivative of that. And that's as far as I go with it. I believe in a description of human behavior, not a prescription of human behavior. And so that's why like what I do is a little bit different than other, like, say, self-help coaches. And before what you're saying about Men of Action, it's a performance coaching product, but it's a performance coaching product totally based on evidence and science. So there's three places where I got my ideas from. First, like I said, I managed a strip club, I worked at a nightclub, and then I joined the military. I was in the military for 7 years, and I dealt with really shitty leadership and really great leadership. And then I also worked for several different businesses, both as an intern, sometimes as a coach. Sometimes I worked in marketing. In these cases, I saw what good leadership looks like and what bad leadership looks like. Secondarily, of the books I read, I try to go somewhere between 30 and 60 books a year is what I try to get through every year. And then third, through my experience, either through interviewing people or through coaching people, what does human behavior and the human experience actually look like? And then can we quantify what the human experience looks like? And the answer is we can. And so that's also very offensive to people who believe in like woo-woo shit, like mysticism or astrology or numerology. They don't like the idea that you can quantify the human experience, but you can. You definitely can quantify the human experience. Men in general are more interested in casual sex than women. This is amongst all societies and throughout all time. Men in general are bigger than women. It doesn't mean they're better than women. It just means they're bigger than women. Just on general, they're bigger than women. That men in general have about 17 times as much testosterone coursing through their veins as women do. This doesn't make men better than women. It just means in general, that's how they are. And then you can also speak in other generalities. Men are about 90% stronger in their upper body and 50% stronger in their lower body than women. Women, however, have the ability to dissect male hierarchies better than men can. This is really crazy. Also, women are way better at being able to look at people and be like, oh, she's fucking him. That guy right here, he's cheating on his wife with that person. Women are way better at discerning hierarchies amongst humans than men are. Men are better at sort of like spatial definition and like things that would be helpful in order to hunt game, in order to provide meat protein for the tribe. Those selective skills, men tend to be better at that. And that makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. Men would be better at things like pathfinding. Women are better at reading facial expressions. That would make sense from an evolutionary standpoint. Those defining men and women in that way is very offensive to people. Do I know, like, for instance, would Candace Parker beat my ass at basketball? Fuck yeah, she would. Candace Parker's an awesome basketball player, but she can't compete in the NBA, but she could beat me. Are there exceptions to the rule? 100%. Are there female Marines that are way better at firing firearms than I am? Of course of course there are. There are always exceptions. There are not very many women that can bench press more than me, but there are probably women that are better at like certain sports than I am. It doesn't mean like Serena Williams would hand me my liver on a tennis court. Of course. But those tend to be exceptions. And what we need to do is not say, because there are differences biologically, physiologically, and neurologically between men and women, that makes men better or women better. That makes us different. And we understand the species better if we grasp those differences rather than pretending that they don't exist and trying to believe that we're all some sort of like non-binary androgynous. By the way, there's nothing wrong with you choosing to be non-binary. The point is you weren't born non-binary. Right. You were born XY or XX. And so you choosing to have the proclivities that XY has, which is I want to have sex with a bunch of women, or XX has, which is I'm looking for a high status male to have babies with, that doesn't make you bad or good.
Right. No, I love it. I love it. So you hinted at it a couple of times, join the military. And while you're in the military, you see a lot of different leadership styles. And unfortunately, you don't, it's not like a kid playing college basketball. Hey, I didn't like the coach, I'm just going to transfer somewhere else and I'll go get a different leader. It's like, well, no, that leader is your leader, and you're a part of that. So talk a little bit about, what you learned, good leadership characteristics that, really were imprinted on you that you wanted to take away from your military experience.
The leadership one is the most important thing. I think when people hear the term leadership, they think of like the boss, and that's not what it means. Like Henry VIII is a great example of someone who was in charge, but certainly not a good leader, right?
Yes.
Terrible leader.
Yes.
Joseph Stalin is another great example of someone who was a horrifically bad leader, poor leader, but had a ton of authority. Just because you have authority does not make you a great leader.
Boom.
A great example of a terrific leader. A lot of people wouldn't realize this. Mother Teresa is a great example of a terrific leader. Somebody who's willing to serve to the point that she encouraged other people to serve. Mahatma Gandhi is another example of a great leader. Another example would be Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King had less authority than the president of the United States, but was probably a better leader than Lyndon Johnson. If you were to look at, and I think Lyndon Johnson would agree with that as well.
Yeah.
So leadership also has to do with followership. One of the great examples I would highly recommend anyone who wants to learn about leadership. There's several books, but a couple of my favorite ones is the Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, The Dichotomy of Leadership, also by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. The other book that I would read is called The Gates of Fire, and this book is about King Leonidas and taking on the Middle Eastern army of King Xerxes II, or King Xerxes I, in 482 BC, I believe. This is the Battle of Thermopylae. The movie 300 was about this battle. And one of the things he says is that the difference between Xerxes and Leonidas is that if Leonidas wants to go to war, he's the first one into battle. He's the first one there with his troops. When something needs to be built or something needs to be done, King Leonidas is the first one to pick up a hammer. That's what a true leader is. King Xerxes allowed his troops, his slaves, to just go and fight for him on his behalf. And that's why they eventually lost and Greek remained a free country, was because Xerxes had a bunch of slaves that were poorly trained and poorly motivated fighting for him. And Xerxes had a bunch of Spartans that were gladly willing to give their life in order to protect their homeland. And so that's a great example of what good leadership looks like versus bad leadership. The book Gates of Fire is also like a required reading for U.S. Marine Corps officers. And that's the reason why. So I think that's the main thing. And then the other thing, what does that mean? So direct communication versus passive aggressive communication. Can I give you critical criticism with understand that I'm not actually trying to attack you? Like last night is a great example. We had a girl on there who believes in astrology. And I tried to explain to her, like, she's like, you live in a world of reason, and I lived in a world of possibilities. And I'm like, no, I live in a world of possibilities, and we both live in a world of reason. Regardless of whether or not you agree with it, again, it's the speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. The speed of light is still that speed, whether or not humans are on the earth to perceive that speed. And the speed of light would exist whether or not you feel like it's 300,000 kilometers per second or not. She's like, well, we can't measure things that go on in other galaxies. And I'm like, yeah, we can. You can get a PhD in cosmology. You legitimately can measure other galaxies using things like parallax, red and blue shifting, spectroscopy, and using the speed of light in order to determine things. You definitely can. And we know the uniformity of the universe based, or the uniformity of this galaxy and other galaxies based on things like gravity and nuclear fusion and et cetera. And she's like, she just waved her hand away, like, no, we don't know any of this. And I'm like, yeah, we do. Like this one group of people were willing to do the work.
Yes.
And you aren't. That doesn't negate them because you believe in astrology. That doesn't negate astronomers. And that was very difficult for her to understand. And that's the problem. Like one of the reasons why I'll bring it up. This happens to be a very attractive woman who got a job, and she has a job based on her physical appearance. And because of that, she has the privilege of being able to believe in nonsense and get away with it. Whereas me as a man, I don't have that privilege. I run a business where I have people working for me. I don't have the privilege of being like, hey guys, I'm not sure what, marketing campaign we should do. Let's look at our horoscopes. I don't have the privilege of being that ignorant. Right. And so because I'm a man, and when you see, it's like orders of magnitude more women believe in astrology than men. That's the reason why. This is not to say women are worse. It's just sometimes when people, by the way, you know what else you'll find is that like people like Kyrie Irving believe in flat earth or believe that, the Holocaust didn't happen. Why does he do that? Because from a very young age, he knew he was going to be a first round draft pick in the NBA. He knew that. He played like 11 games at Duke
Yep.
and then got drafted to the NBA. He always believed that he was special, and no one told him no because he had the nastiest crossover in the NBA. And so because of that, he had the privilege of being able to believe in nonsense. And so that's what happens. Those of us who don't have that privilege because we have to work hard, we don't get to believe in nonsense. And we don't even have time to go down the nonsense of like aliens built the pyramids, reptiles live under Antarctica, the earth is flat, etc. We don't believe in these things because, again, like it's really funny. She goes into this argument about, well, the reason why there's wars is because men run countries. And I'm like, the reason why there's wars is because some people conduct violence and other people have to stop that violence with violence.
Right.
It was not rational for Germany to invade France. It really wasn't rational. They didn't have the population to withhold that country. What was rational, however, was the UK and the United States storming Normandy in order to save France. That was rational. It was not rational for Germany to invade. It was not rational for Germany to invade Russia in the winter because Napoleon had previously done it and had the same results. They died. What was rational was for Joseph Stalin to then try to have those people try to fight against them, and poorly, I might add. They lost 25 million people in Russia defeating the Nazis. But like the point is, rationality and whether or not, like, people don't understand violence is not a one-sided thing. Violence only happens because other people are willing to do violence. It is not rational. I'll say this, and I get a lot of hate for this. It was not rational for Vladimir Putin to invade the Ukraine. It was rational, however, for Ukraine to defend themselves. And so that's the thing. Like, a lot of people are like, well, no, men are the problem. Like, no, not men are the problem. People with mental disorders are the problem. 25 nations in this country are run by women. Like, it's not this idea that it's just men that are doing this. Utterly nonsense. One of the most hawkish political leaders that we've ever had was Margaret, the Prime Minister of the UK, the Iron Lady. I can't remember her name right now, and I apologize. Back in the 80s, she was a hawk. She was she was very pro-military. So I don't know. It's just one of these things where some people have the ability to not live in reality. But the reason why you have the ability to not live in that reality, why you can be so comfortable with your opinions and protest these things, is because other men were willing to do violence on your behalf.
Correct.
There are bad men out there. And the reason why those bad men can't get to you is because the United States has even badder men. Yeah. But our bad men have things like stealth aircraft, night vision goggles, sniper rifles. That we have things like fucking submarines and aircraft carrier groups. That's the reason why our bad men can cancel out those bad men. And that's the reason why this is the safest time in history.
Absolutely. Now, while you're in the military, you have a real tough stretch. I think your dad passed away, and then you had been in a relationship, and the relationship ends. And you read this book, The Power of Now, and you talk about how really that season starts kind of changing some of your mindset. So talk a little bit about, going through the tough of that, and then also being in the military and just having to balance it all.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. In 06, it would have been it was May 19th, 2006, when my father was killed by a drunk driver. And then afterwards, I wasn't dealing with it at all. Like, mentally, I was just like pushing it out of my head because I'm a U.S. Air Force navigator on flight status. I'm flying all the time. Like, in my mind, I'm a technician. I'm a performer. I'm a U.S. military officer, and I'm preparing to go to war. Yeah. The fact that my dad died, of course, it made me sad, but I was choosing to not process it until the funeral. And then I just lost it all at once. When I do that 6 week, I remember, like, on the way back from Dallas after the funeral, I had a commander hit me up, and he's like, "Hey, we just want to let you know you're going to deploy in 6 weeks." It was kind of weird. Like, in my mind, it was like, he wasn't asking me either. He was telling me. Yeah. And, he's my commander. And I remember thinking, like, is he warning me? Like, what was going on? Once I deployed, I realized, oh, this was the best thing for me. To deploy after my father passed away, to know unequivocally that I was doing something that my father would have been proud of. Yeah. After passing away. So that was part of it. The other thing was, when I got there, one of the things that happened is I met a girl that I had the biggest crush on ever early in 2006. And we were getting along famously. And then two things happened. Number one, my dad dies. And number two, I deploy. That's a lot for a woman who you just started dating to be able to handle. And so, I deploy, and the way she dealt with it was not very cool. Like, she just basically, this is the beginning of social media. Remember, Facebook 05 and 06, I'm already deployed. And now I'm watching, I'm looking at pictures of her with her new Marine Corps boyfriend in Cabo San Lucas. And, it's just funny. Like later on, also goes back to the first thing we were talking about. People will say things and then do another.
Yeah.
The dude was cheating on her the entire time. And I knew that because I had another friend that I was talking to, another girl I was talking to, and she just showed me text messages of this guy cheating on the girl that I used to date. Now, of course, I didn't tell her because I'm not a snitch, but like one of the things I just noticed is like what a poor decision she made in her life in order to do that. And I think she recognized it like years later. It's like, man, I really probably shouldn't have done that. But it was just one of these weird situations where I go through all these things and it's just, but there's one other thing, and this pales in comparison, but it definitely affected me. I'm a Dallas Mavericks fan. Nothing in the world, sports-wise, means more to me than the Dallas Mavericks.
Oh, no.
Remember in June, do you remember June of 2006? The Mavericks were up 0-2 on the Heat, and then they lose. Having your basketball team that has been just stomped on for its entire existence go to the NBA Finals and then just get pounded like that and then to do it after your dad died and your girlfriend left you, that was a very low point, man. I remember I started breaking out. I started having like the first symptoms of an autoimmune disorder, which I was later kicked out of the military for. Medically retired. Was not kicked out. Medically retired. Those things started manifesting in 2006 because of the stress I was dealing with. Come back, and I read a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It originally was recommended to me by Owen Cook from RSD, and then later on was recommended by a buddy of mine that was living in Atlanta. And so I read the book, and I remember just after the third chapter, just pulling my car over to the side of the road and just like feeling this incredible weight lifted off my shoulder with the realization that these things don't matter. And I like this stress that I'm like literally choosing to live in the present moment and understanding what matters and what doesn't matter. That book is so fantastic for people who have suffered enough. When you give that book to somebody who's sort of holding on to their identity, or they have this like sort of middling existence where they feel some pain, but they're grasping onto something. Those people don't understand the book at all. It's really interesting when I give that book to a lot of people, like it's very clear that these people haven't suffered enough. When you've had several family members die, or you've hit rock bottom with some sort of drug addiction, or you've had your wife leave you and like just had thoughts of suicide, like you've hit rock bottom, The Power of Now is the greatest book you'll ever read. If you haven't suffered enough, the book is going to seem like you're just not ready for it. It's really interesting because I consistently survey my clients, and some of them just find no utility in it whatsoever. And some of it, very frequently I have people say, this is the greatest book I've ever read. And you'll find that this person has lost a limb, been partially paralyzed. Like I'm talking devastating levels of suffering. If you've gone through that, this is the greatest book you've ever read. For the rest of you, when you read it, you're going to be like, no, my ego is kind of great. I kind of like my ego. I don't want to get rid of it. And then you just don't understand how much more you can be if you can transcend the ego. And sometimes I fall out of it. I'd tell you last night, that definitely happened. I got into an argument with somebody I shouldn't have got into an argument with. And I started yelling. And I understood that it was my ego needing to be right. So yeah, that book definitely changed my life.
That's good. So you mentioned, hey, end up getting retired from the military and you visit Vegas, but you end up moving to LA. And you just talked about how, when you're in LA, just weren't meeting the right types of people. So talk a little bit about that phase of life for you.
When I first moved to LA?
Yeah.
No, the thing is, Los Angeles and Las Vegas is really interesting for people who don't live here. You think in your mind what LA is. Hot girls running down the beach like Baywatch.
Yeah, right.
In these one pieces, and they're blonde and they have big boobs and they're in shape and they're just beautiful women everywhere. That's what you think Los Angeles is. And that's actually what Las Vegas is. Los Angeles is destitute, incredibly high levels of poverty, crime, and homelessness, and nothing really to stop the homelessness. In just unbelievable, like huge, if you go to Skid Row, like incredible amounts of destitution and poverty and crime. It is incredibly unsafe. There are parts of Los Angeles where you go through and you legitimately feel like you're driving through Detroit or Baltimore. The beaches are dirty. And then the amount that it costs you because of the state income tax is so exorbitantly high. Yeah. There's nowhere to park. And then the people there are just some of the most rotten human beings I've ever met in my entire life. I don't understand how people live in Los Angeles. I really don't. The weather, yes. I love the weather. I love Griffith Observatory. I love the food, and I love the Clippers.
That's about it. The rest of that place is just terrible. So I go and I go to events there. And when I'm at the events, it's really funny when I talk to people who are like, oh, I love Los Angeles. And you're like, why? And you realize that they're just coping. Like they don't love Los Angeles. It's just like, it's almost like Stockholm syndrome. They're like, yeah, I don't mind that I'm paying 6 times as much in rent as you are in Las Vegas, and that my friends can't park, and that I can't have a functioning relationship because every time I meet someone who lives in another city, it's an hour drive to get there. I'm just going to cope and pretend like it's okay. Los Angeles is a great place to live if you have $50 million. If you have $49 million, I would not move to Los Angeles. And so that was the thing, is like, I would go to LA, I would go to a nightclub full of like very sad looking, ugly people. And one time I remember Bruno Mars had the table next to ours. He wasn't that famous back then, but this is not 2011. Bruno Mars was not that famous. He was kind of famous, but not that famous. He had the table next to ours. And I just remember looking at I don't mean to be rude, but like somewhat overweight women that were coming to his table and like kissing his ass. And I'm like, bro, you did all that singing and dancing for this? Seriously? That's what you did, all that for this shit? And then I would go to Vegas and I would meet some like broke 22-year-old club promoter who's sleeping on couches, who's fucking 3 playmates at the same time. And I was like, wait, in LA, Bruno Mars is with fat girls. And in Vegas, there's a fucking club promoter who's banging 3 playmates. Wait, something doesn't match up. The Baywatch looking girls, they're in Vegas. They're not in Los Angeles. It was really hard for me to grasp that. What you think LA is actually Las Vegas. And so that's why I moved out here. I genuinely don't understand how any single man wouldn't live in Las Vegas. This is definitely the best city in the country for a single man to live in. Much cheaper, much cleaner. There's no humidity, which is absolutely fantastic. And our pool parties are better. Our Tuesday pool parties are better than anything you've ever gone to in your entire life. It's not even close. Wet Republic's bikini competition. We have the best bikini competitions in the world. We have the best DJs in the world. We have the best restaurants in the world. We have the cleanest city in the world. It's absolutely the greatest place ever. Now, do we have a problem with crime and homelessness? No, we don't. Oh, as far as homelessness is concerned, there's a city called North Las Vegas where we put homeless people in that city, and then all the services like Catholic services and Meals on Wheels and what's it called, 3square.org, they all go there and they can feed all the homeless people at the same time. They provide, if people are going to, drug addicts, they provide clean needles. Obviously people are going to just use drugs. And then there's the homeless shelters. We put them all in one place in North Vegas. And that was under the guidance of Mayor Oscar Goodman, who did that. And I know a lot of people don't like that idea. Like in Los Angeles, homeless people can just live wherever they want. They can pitch a tent in front of your house and you legally can't move them. In Las Vegas, we don't play like that. There's no homeless people on the strip. And it's not because we hate homeless people. We actually care about them enough to actually provide services for them and not promote them continuing to commit crimes and use drugs. So that's the reason why, North Vegas exists. This is just a better city to live in with better people. And I know a lot of people are like, no, people in Vegas are fake. No one's lying to you in Las Vegas. When you go to Las Vegas, everyone tells you this is how much that bottle is going to cost. This is how much that table dance is going to cost. This is how much dinner at Catch is going to cost. No one lies to you in Vegas. If you really think about what I'm saying, no one is lying to you in Las Vegas. We're telling you the truth. The liars are in Los Angeles. Oh, you're going to be famous. Oh, let me on your podcast. I have this incredible Netflix series I'm going to be on. Oh, come check out this new crypto product I just started. All the NFT fucking, all those things, those conferences, those are all in Los Angeles. Okay. Yeah. All those dudes who are like, he's a part-time pimp, music producer, actor, and fucking drug dealer at the same time. Those are LA guys. Those are not Vegas people. People like that don't make it in Las Vegas. Right. And also in LA, girls have to look good on camera. In Vegas, girls have to look good in person. That's the difference. Because a guy's not going to drop $100K for a table for like some girl, who face tunes her face on her Instagram. It doesn't work like that. You don't get hired at Wet Republic because you're Facetune. You get hired at Wet Republic because you're stunning. So I compare the two cities, just one city that's like, both of the cities are shallow. I'm not saying that, but one city is like really full of, I think, accomplished people who have to back up everything they say. And another city is just full of bullshit. That's just the way I see it.
I love it. So you hit on it as you transition to Vegas. You end up starting to host different events, pool parties, and helping make them be the phenomenal events they are. And part of your mission is tied to philanthropic things. And one is, as you mentioned earlier, with the cat, animal rescue, but then also domestic abuse. And so talk a little bit about how you were able to start pooling those different events together to, one, have a great time, but two, support a good cause.
I bumped into a bunch of club promoters, and I didn't like the people they were or the people they wanted me to be. I was never a club promoter per se. Like maybe a sub promoter is what you could call me or whatever. I never got paid for it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, I would meet these guys, and they treated women like cattle, and I was like, man, this is not I don't want to do this. I don't feel good about this. And so what I started to do is I was like, well, I know all these female influencers, and I see things in them that other people don't see. What if, and it definitely wasn't my idea to do this, it was Steve Fowler's. What if we start using these incredibly attractive women in order to raise money for charity? What if we started using influencers to raise money for charity? And the biggest and probably the original influencer charity in Los Angeles is called Babes in Toyland, which I am the host of. Steve Fowler is the head of it. And so we do that. There's another one called Babes for Boobs. There's another one called Smash Global. There's another one called the Model Citizen Fund. These are all influencer charities. Basically, you'll have Lindsay Palis, Abigail Ratchford, Emily Sears, other big influencers come to the events, and we were able to raise money for charity because of those events. The main ones we do are going to be animal rescue is the biggest one. It just is. Because the thing is, animal rescue does not, religious or political lines do not stop you. It doesn't matter if you're a hardcore fundamental Islamist or if you're a Christian or if you're a Buddhist. Taking care of animals and like the idea that there's all these homeless animals, everyone wants to cure that. So that it crosses racial, political, socioeconomic lines. Animal rescue does. So that's why a lot of them are animal rescue. The human trafficking one and the domestic abuse one is another one that's also really helped. It's really pervasive amongst the influencers themselves because one of the things I found is, this is really sad, man, but a lot of domestic abuse charities that I've worked with before, they don't want playmates coming to their charity events. And it's really stunning to me.
Yeah.
And what I believe has happened is a lot of these, not all of them, some of them, but like they legitimately, when they see women posing nude, they're remembering their abuser, their male abuser, saying, you look like a whore, denigrating them, calling these names. And that the echo of that abuse is still in their head, even though they've escaped the abuse and they work for a domestic abuse charity. And they almost act like a girl who's a playmate, like it's okay that she gets abused, but this other woman, it's like this real weird conundrum that happens with these domestic abuse charities. And I'm like, no, you should be inviting everyone to raise money. When I try to raise money for, like, say, troops overseas, they don't care about the playmates. They're totally troops overseas are totally fine with playmates. They don't give a fuck about that. Yeah. It's just really interesting how different charities are totally in favor of certain things and some are not. Homeless charities do not. They're very much in favor of anyone giving money and collecting resources. They have no problem with influencers raising money for some of these homeless charities. It's funny. The domestic abuse ones, those are the ones that like are kind of strange to me. They're like, yeah, we don't want girls who like take their clothes off on Instagram in order to like represent our charity. And I'm like, why? Did they not get hit by their boyfriends also?
Right.
Like, what is it? Do you think they deserve to get hit? This is just really weird.
Yeah.
Not all, but some.
Right.
That's the only place where I ever get pushback is that with the influencer charities. But yeah, I just realized, I tell Lindsay Palis this. She has a superpower. Lindsay Palis can get millions of people to look at a thing. So why don't we get her to look? Why don't we get these people to look at the thing that's animal rescue or homeless children?
Yeah.
Orphanages. Why don't we get Model Citizen Fund? They create backpacks with like over 50 items in the 150 items in the backpacks that help people survive that are on the streets. They're for orphanages, domestic abuse charities, and they're also for homeless shelters. So like, why don't we just do that? Make practical ways to give back and help people. And that's what I've done recently. I recruit these girls to come to these events. So instead of what a promoter does, which is come to my table and fuck my client, here's some cocaine, stay here all day and drink so we can exploit you. What I do instead is, hey, here's a charity event. We're going to put you on a red carpet. We've got Getty photographers, so you're going to get content from this. Film everything, put it up on your OF, put it up on your Instagram. Just as long as you help us raise money to rescue these dogs or rescue these cats, that's all we need for you. Will you please help us? And the girls say yes. So in one case, the promoter is taking value. In the other case, the charity, we're offering value.
That's great. I love that. Now, in 2015, and I'm noticing this in you, you get passionate about something and you will learn a ton about it. But 2015, you start taking on money and being a money manager, and you were able to learn from Tom. So talk a little bit just about, getting into some of the money management and how that came to be for you.
So I started trading for myself in 2013. That was like my primary source of income. 2017, I got picked up by a small firm because my returns were so good, called Continental Financial Capital. So I'm a quantitative analyst. I'm still a quantitative analyst for this, although we're starting a different fund and they want me to do a different role. They actually want me. So Continental Financial Capital is starting an all-woman fund. That's what they want to do. And so they want me, because I know so many females that follow me are involved. We're looking for female CPAs and female fund managers and female portfolio managers and female accountants and stuff like that to be in this whole company. So I'm in the recruiting space for this firm, but I also do some trading for them. It was just one of these things where it made more sense to me. Technical and fundamental analysis don't work. And the reason why we know they don't work, there's been Nobel Prizes that have been posted for efficient market hypothesis, random market hypothesis. We understand that if you have an efficient market where people have about the same level of information on the market and everyone's trying to express their opinion on whether or not to go long or short in equity, and they have that ability to do so, and everyone's trying to take each other's money, and it kind of is a zero-sum game. What you're going to get is a random market, and no single person can predict accurately over a long period of time where the market's going to go. And what you'll find is 86% of the time, people who are active traders do not beat the returns of the S&P 500. So who are the people that do consistently get the high returns? It's people like Jim Simons, who actually take both sides of the market. And so what is the way for a retail trader to be able to take both sides of the market and actually take advantage of the fact that other people think they know which way the market's going to go? And the answer, which it took me a long time to come to, is stock options. Selling stock options allows you to take it. Again, other people think they know which way the market's going to go, so they're going to buy puts or buy calls. We, as people who understand efficient market hypothesis, know that they cannot know which way the market's going to go. So I don't want to buy those puts or calls. I want to be the guy selling them those puts or calls. Do you want to be the state selling the lottery tickets, or do you want to be the guy buying the lottery tickets? You want to be selling the lottery tickets. So you want to be selling the stock options. And so that's kind of an easy way to explain it. Also, you can choose your winning percentage, very similar to what the house does in Las Vegas. Blackjack, I think it was a 52.5% or 51.5% chance of losing in those games. So, you can choose your percentages. You can get the high probability trade. So stock options is the way that I explain to people. You can take the advantage of other people's hubris, and you can also take advantage of market volatility, meaning I trade more when the markets are more volatile, and I trade less when they're less volatile. And so that's what I've learned from Tom and Tony. And we traded. Now, you can get yourself in some trouble when you get some 20 standard deviation moves, like what happened during the Corona crash. If you're trading undefined risk, it'll bankrupt you. If you're trading defined risk, you're going to lose a lot of money. But like losing 30% when you trade stock options isn't that big of a deal, because you can make 50% in a year trading stock options pretty easily. So that's kind of the way it works. It's also one of the reasons why I'm nominally into crypto, but not super into crypto, because crypto does not have a liquid options market yet. It's funny. So many people in crypto are like, they trade options in crypto. And I'm like, no, but they don't have a liquid options market. And they're like, but you can trade options. So I'm like, oh, wait, you don't understand what liquid options market means, because you started by trading crypto and never learned traditional finance. I recommend people start with traditional finance and then learn crypto as a derivative of traditional finance, so you can learn what bid-ask spreads are, or how liquidity and volume works, rather than trying to learn that through crypto and then not understanding things like how illiquid some of these some of these equities actually are. And yes, crypto is equities. Once they're regulated, and they will be regulated, they're just going to be regular equities like everyone else. Cryptocurrency is just like that girl who tells you, I don't fuck guys on the first date, but she's just like every other girl who fuck. Like, I'm not like she's the girl who's like, I'm not like other girls, and turns out she's exactly like other girls. That's what cryptocurrency is. Cryptocurrency is like, I'm like not other things. And then like, well, turns out you're going to get regulated by the SEC. Turns out like you can be manipulated by scammers. You're exactly like pink slips. You're exactly like the correlation between cryptocurrency and penny stocks is so incredibly high. It's unbelievable. And so, and people don't want to say that. You can still, I'm not saying you can't make money from them. You can definitely make a lot of money from cryptocurrency. My point is, this idea that they're different and somehow this is an equity that's going to change the world. It's just not the case. It's very similar to the argument where I'm 45 years old.
every 10 years or so, there's always these articles that come out about how the world is going to get off this dollar standard. Yep. People are going to move away from the dollar. This happens over and over again. The newest one is called the BRIC, where China, like Venezuela, Brazil, these countries are coming together to create their own currency.
Yep.
What you don't seem to understand is that, like, the reason why those things don't work, like the euro doesn't work, because countries like Greece and France will run up so much debt that they ruin the currency for countries like Germany. And so the same thing is going to happen here. When you have totalitarian dictatorships that have like currency controls, one of them is just going to fuck it up for the rest.
Right.
Like once that currency is going to screw up once Venezuela incurs a ton of debt, or Brazil does, and then all of a sudden China has to pay their debt. China's not going to want to be part of the BRIC anymore. That's essentially what's going to happen. That's why it doesn't work. The United States, while the dollar may be flawed and the Fed may be flawed, there's only one Fed and $1, and that's the reason why we don't have that same problem.
Correct.
If you run up your debt in China, if you run up your debt in Saudi Arabia, the United States doesn't have to pay your debt.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. The United States has to pay its own debt, but it doesn't have to pay yours, and that's the difference.
I love it. So with your podcast, you have a lot of great speakers, but one of the things that has gotten a lot of traction as of late is some of the things we've talked about a little bit earlier, and that is the dating scene for guys and girls. And you have this amazing thing where you walk through and you ask girls, you say, hey, what do you think the probability of a guy having this status or a guy having this? You tell me. And it's amazing the numbers that some people throw out there. And so talk a little bit about that and just some of the research that you've done. I mean, it's just fascinating.
So there's, if you guys want to look it up, there's this thing called the male delusional calculator and the female delusional calculator.
Yeah.
And what they do is, like, you put in the demographics of the person that you would most like to date.
Yeah.
So for men, one of the advantages men have is that we don't really care if a woman makes a lot of money. My girlfriend would be my girlfriend if she was broke or if she was rich. I wouldn't make any difference to me whatsoever. However, most women do not look at men the same way. Right. Men, we have to produce, we have to show some level of competency, some level of ambition, or at least a future path to some level of success or wealth or whatever, etc. Whereas men, we look at women and we generally see, does she bring peace into my life? Is she loyal? Am I physically attracted to her? So men and women look for different things. This goes back to the evolutionary psychology thing. Some people find this unfair. I don't really care if it's unfair. It's the truth. So that's essentially where it starts. What was the original question? Hold on.
No, you're good. Just talking about some of the interesting findings that you've had from doing your research on that topic.
So the calculators. The statistics. So what happens is we do the male delusional calculator and the female delusional calculator. I will say I want a woman. If a woman was 6'1" and gorgeous, I wouldn't care. And if she was 5'1" and gorgeous, I wouldn't. So understand, as a man, I don't care about a woman's height or income. That's actually a huge advantage for me. That means there's a huge swath of women that I can choose from that are physically attractive. That are, like, all I want is, I generally don't want to date someone who's had a kid, and I generally don't want to date someone who's currently married, right? That would be, and then also the other things is I would generally not like to be with a woman who's been with 100 men or 50 men. Like I want a lower body count. That's just generally what, again, not just me, 37 culture study done by Dr. David Buss. In all of those cultures, men care more about a woman's body count than vice versa. So understanding these things, I know the amount of women I have to choose from. And when I put in my demographics in the male delusional calculator, it turns out to somewhere between 9 to 14% of women. Now, granted, they have to be physically attractive too, and there's no demographic for physically attractive. So it's maybe not 9 to 14%, but maybe it's like, let's just even say 3 or 4% of women. That's fine. 4% of women I can choose from. Let's just say that, okay?
Yep.
For women, they just start saying, I want a man who makes over $200,000 a year. That puts you in the top 10% of wage earners. I want a man who's over 6 feet tall. That puts you in the top 14% of men. Only 14% of men are over 6 feet tall. Only 1% of men are 6'3". Okay.
Wow.
I want this man to not be married and not be obese. 75% of Americans are obese. So that's the top 25% of men that are not obese and not married. So you want a man who makes over 200 grand a year and is not married. You've cut off a huge swath of men. This is why you see women chasing after married men frequently. Okay. Yeah. Now, what happened is, whereas my demographics in my male delusional calculator showed that 4% of women, it said 9 to 14%, but 4% of women are attractive enough for me to date. For women, it's 0.02% of men. So it's 0.02% of men versus 4% of women, meaning as a man, while you look at me and it's very rare that I make, because I'm over 6 feet tall and I make over, top 10% of wage earners or whatever. And I don't have any kids and I'm not obese. Yeah. What for me, the demographic is 0.2% of men. And when I talk to these women, I'm like, there's very few of me and there's a lot more of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How many times can 0.02 go into 4%? It's a lot of times. It's 50 times 4. There's 200 of you for every one of me.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to explain to them, I'm like, you wonder why I don't pick you. It's not because you're not awesome. It's not super hot. It's just, I have so many other options to choose from. This one girl last night, she's just screaming at me during the podcast. And she's like, would you date me, Michael? And I'm like, it's not about whether or not I would date you. It's about, is there a version of you that's going to scream at me less, have slept with fewer men, right? And is going to be just provide more peace and loyalty in my life. If there is, I'm going to choose her over you. It's not that you're not great. I meet so many fucking beautiful women all the time. And I'm like, God damn, she's so beautiful. And then you see the rest of the story. And I'm like, that is not someone I would have a relationship with.
Right.
There's someone, would you have sex? Of course, men are less picky than women. Would you have sex with her? Yeah, you'd have sex with her. But would you be in a relationship with her? No, because she does not provide the peace, the loyalty, the serenity that you need in a relationship. Then women, they do themselves this horrible disservice of saying the reason why this man doesn't want to be with you is because he's intimidated by you. Ladies, if a man is telling you or a woman is telling you this guy broke up with you or ghosted you because he's intimidated by you, the woman who's telling you that is not your friend. Men do not break up with you because they're intimidated by you. I did not buy a bed made of rocks. I bought a bed that was a comfortable bed. Just because I don't sleep on a bed made of rocks does not mean I'm intimidated by rocks. What it means is I have a preference for a comfortable bed. Because I don't want to date you, it's not because I'm intimidated by your belief system. Especially this girl last night was like talking about astrology. I'm not intimidated by your belief about astrology. I just know that happens to be wrong.
Right.
What happens is I have a preference for someone who's physically attractive just like you are, but isn't going to give me this nonsense about things that aren't true. It's not intimidated. I have a I don't like pickles. I just thing. I just don't like eating pickles. I'm not intimidated by pickles. I just have a preference to not eat them. Yes. And what's happened is women try to build themselves up. The reason why they got ghosted or dumped was because men were intimidated, meaning the woman was so great. She was so incredibly intelligent and great. That's why he couldn't deal with it. No, if she was so great, he would have stayed.
Right.
What's happened is instead, he has a preference for someone who is more pliable, more agreeable, more loyal, etc. And by the pliable is not even a great word. Like my girlfriend and I don't agree on a lot of things, but she still understands there has to be boundaries in the relationship. And if she ever publicly disrespects me, our relationship is over. She understands that. Yep. And those are the things I need her to understand in order for the relationship to work. So a lot of women get this wrong. Ladies, stop saying men are intimidated by your intelligence. They're not intimidated. What they are, you need to ask yourself, do you provide peace in a relationship? Because if you don't, that's why you're not getting chosen by that upper echelon man that you're looking for.
Love it. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. So the last thing I'll have you kind of walk through is with the men of action, the 5 pillars, and just talk a little bit about, how you came up with those and why those 5 are the most important.
So for the first Men of Action course has 5 pillars. The second one has 6. Okay. So there's MOA and MOA Advanced. So it goes high status networking, then it goes leadership, entrepreneurship, it goes mindset, and then finance. We go into like some financial literacy stuff. Then it's social networking, event planning, evolutionary psychology, and then it's critical thinking, and then it's winning mindset. So those are the next ones. So it's 114 modules. There's 50 in the first one, 64 in the second part of it. They used to be 2 separate programs. Yeah. But it's been several years. So now we just put it into one program when you join, and you're going to learn all those different concepts. And then we're going to do 3-hour Q&As on each one of them until you completely understand these concepts and you're able to grasp them. My objective is to make you a competent, competitive man, period. Not competitive or competent for women or just for your job. It's for everything. Networking is an evolutionary adaptation. And one of the things that you'll find is that the networking you do in order to show high status to get venture capitalists to come to your event is the same sort of show of high status that gets the woman of your dreams to go on a date with you. Networking is networking, and status is status is status. who can get in front of venture capitalists quicker, me or Jake Paul? Obviously, Jake Paul can. Even though Jake Paul doesn't have venture capitalist status, he just has more status. Status is status is status. And that's what you'll find is that, like, when Michael Jordan wants to get involved with some kind of like master's class, crypto product, or venture capital fund, he's going to get in front of them before I am because he has more status, not because he has a background in venture capital. Yes. And so that's one of the things people don't grasp. So what we do is work on your status in order to enable more networking, right? In order to grow, to scale your ability to network. One of the easiest free ways for an average man to show off higher status is through social media. So we go very, very intricately through your social media and dating apps and stuff like that to show in LinkedIn, Twitter, all that stuff in order to show the highest level of status. We don't fake it though. And we don't show money. One of the things very unique about my program is that we don't use money. This is one of the things, like, people who don't know what I do, they think what I do is like have guys show money to get girls. There's none of that. We don't pay for our locations. We never pay girls to hang out with us. We do not use money. You never see in my advertisements, you don't see Patek watches or Lamborghinis ever. Yeah. Right? That's never what it's about. We like, how do we use status, connect people? Are we the connector, the suggester, the content creator? How do we use status in order to bring these people in our lives? And we specifically don't use money. Now, what happens is when you take my course and then you have money, the money just like accelerates what you're doing. But I don't teach a course. I was joking. I should make a course like how to date hot girls, usually only $100 million, right? That would be hilarious. Right. But of course, that's not the course I teach. I teach a course on how to get status, how to get the girl of your dreams, the job of your dreams, network with the mentors you've always wanted to network with by using no money. How do you do that? That's what I teach in my course.
I love it. Well, Michael, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. You are getting 100% out of life of what you want. And I know everyone listening today got to hear, one, a great story, but two, a lot of tangible takeaways. So I'm excited to continue to watch your journey. And probably 4 years from now, we'll have to do this again and highlight all the new pivotal moments that have led to where you're at that point.
For sure. Also, my dad was, I see you're an MBA and a certified financial planner. My dad had an MBA from University of North Texas. And he was certified financial planner. Yeah.
I love it. That's awesome. Yep. That's so cool. Well, no wonder you got into the finance realm. You got to have a little exposure to that. So,
yep.
Awesome, brother. Awesome, well, thanks so much.
All right. Talk to you later, Phil.